Greetings and welcome. You're alone in your car. It's about dusk, and you've been driving for what feels like hours. It feels like a very, very long time. Your eyelids begin to get heavy, and you think to yourself, surely your destination is somewhere close up ahead. It's coming soon. It has to be. And that's when you notice them. You hadn't before, and surely they hadn't been on the side of the road just a moment ago. But perhaps you're just tired. Perhaps that's just your imagination. They had always been there, of course. It's odd to you that in this day and age, anyone would have the old-fashioned hitchhiker's thumb out, requesting for a ride, but there it is all the same. Normally, you would never stop for a hitchhiker. You would never pull over. But the closer you get, the more you feel inclined. They couldn't possibly mean any harm, right? They climb in with a relieved grin and a thank you for your kindness. You're the only one who bothered to stop along this stretch of road. They are attractive, and their kindness and calm puts you at ease. You get to talking, chit-chat, friendly enough. They tell you that they're cold after a while, and so you dutifully turn up the heat in response. They say, no, that wasn't enough after a while, they're still shivering, and so, kindly, you offer your coat. They take it, heaping thanks upon you, and soon the idle chit-chat has turned to light flirting, and the two of you introduce yourselves formally and decide to make plans for a later date. You continue down the road for a few miles until the high beams of another car distract you and blind you for a moment. What a jerk, right? You mention as much to your passenger, turning to inexplicably find them gone. A chill runs down your back. They had been there a moment ago. You were sure of it. And yet, sitting beside you is nothing. You pull over and begin to search frantically, calling out their name. But after a long while, nothing. You begin to feel foolish. Had a person been there at all? No, certainly that wasn't possible. It must have just been a hallucination. You get back into your car, but then, where is your coat? Feeling uneasy, you head home. The next day, an idea springs into your head like a lightning bolt. She had given you information. He had given you their phone number. Whoever it was, you had a way of finding them. And so you very quickly dial the same number. For an eternity, it rings and rings. Eventually, a gruff voice answers on the other line. Hello? You explain who you are and why you're calling, and the strange events of last night, only to be met with an angry, "That's not funny," and a dial tone. You're confused, beyond confused. These events, they're strange. Something's not adding up. You call again, and this time it rings and rings and rings, and you begin to feel as if your trail and this mysterious journey you find yourself on is over. But then, a different voice than the first answers. A soft hello? And you explain who you are and why you're calling once again. The voice sighs, sniffles, and proceeds to give you an address. You punch the address into your GPS, and sure enough, you are off again on another foot of this journey. You're confused, but curious, until you see it. A cemetery. You walk in, and a chill forms in your lower spine, but you fight it and continue on. You think you know what you're looking for. And eventually, sure enough, you find it. It's a grave. One that bears the name of your passenger and the date of their death the night before. What's most chilling to you, however, is the fact that sitting there on top of that grave is the same jacket that you had lent them. You have just experienced a vanishing hitchhiker. Welcome to yet another spooky Sunday story time. Thank you for joining me for this edition of our Vanishing Hitchhiker. No, we're not finished yet. This was a bit of a unique start in which I told a story that I actually wrote. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That is just one example of a vanishing hitchhiker. They are one of the most prolific and known paranormal experiences. The Vanishing Hitchhiker has a couple of different varieties to it. One of the ones that one that I based this story about, that one is a very peculiar occurrence in which a physical object is left with the vanishing hitchhiker, and that physical object appears at their grave or somehow in a location associated with the death of that vanishing hitchhiker. So what is a vanishing hitchhiker? Well, very often they are spirits that died in tragic accidents, generally car accidents, along certain stretches of road. These spirits will cling to that location, desperately looking for a way home, because generally that was the location that they were heading towards. They were trying to get home, and their spirits remain locked, ever, eternal, in this location. Only a ride from a kind stranger might offer any solace at all. And yet, they still seem trapped, despite often appearing to kind people, and those kind people offering rides and seemingly resolving their issues. The vanishing hitchhikers remain. That is not the only instance or type of vanishing hitchhiker. There are actually quite a few. Not all are spirits. Some versions see the situation reversed, in that the one offering the ride, the person picking up, is the spirit. And it's the hitchhiker themselves that find that when they are dropped off at their location, often far from home, they find that those who had given them the ride in the first place, well, they had not been alive at all. Not for quite some time. Other versions exist that are not spirits. They are potentially deities in disguise. One of the most famous tales of a vanishing hitchhiker that involves not a spirit, but rather a deity, comes from the islands of Hawaii and involves the goddess Pele. Pele liked to disguise herself as a vagabond, either an old man or an old woman. Pele would go around the island acting as this vagabond, this person very much in need. Often she would make herself appear lower than low, covered in dirt, a wretch, because her thought was that anyone who would offer kindness to this person, anyone who would offer kindness to this particular vagabond, they deserved the rewards of a goddess, because they would help the creature, or rather the person, not because they felt some duty to good, just because it was the right thing to do. This has roots in other mythologies as well. Very often, deities would disguise themselves as the lowest of the low, hitchhikers, vagabonds, and they would test mortals. They would test them to see who was worthy and who would treat even potentially a god as garbage. Because that was immoral behind that particular version of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. You never really knew who you had picked up or whom you were helping. It could have just as easily been a god in disguise. These myths go back to Greek, Roman, and you will find them all over the world. They are a test of man's humility. And I think that ties in with the ghost and the spirits of the vanishing hitchhikers. It's not often that these people appear to those unwilling to help. In fact, the very first people that do pick them up are often reported as being told that they were the only ones who had bothered to stop. Is it a coincidence? Is it perhaps a test? Are these connected? There's another tale, a very humorous take on the Vanishing Hitchhiker. This particular tale comes from the series Spooky Stories to Tell in the Dark. Two people are on a train, a man and a woman. The man is sitting intently reading a book. The book is about ghosts. It seems like he's studying for something, and the woman is intrigued, so she walks over and sits down next to him. "What are you reading?" she asks, and he explains that it's a book about the paranormal. She is intrigued, and they begin a long back and forth conversation about the paranormal. After a while, she chuckles, and he asks, "What is it?" She explains that she believes him to be a skeptic, and that he does not believe what he is reading. He confirms this, stating, as such, he is a hardened skeptic, and he does not believe in ghosts, nor has he ever seen one. The woman stands and smiles, and replies, "Well, I doubt that very much." And she disappears right in front of him. That is another take on the Vanishing Hitchhiker, obviously one with a very humorous outcome. Now, you might have read our teaser for tonight, and if you did, thank you for taking the time to do so. If you did, you might have noticed that there's a personal aspect to tonight's tales. It's possible that I have encountered a vanishing hitchhiker. At the very least, my brother and I have encountered something that vanished. I'll tell you that story now. My brother and I were on our way to college. He went to URI. I was driving him to an audition. And I was driving, and he was in the passenger seat. And we come upon a bend in the road. We've gone this way pretty much every single day that we drove to college. and experienced nothing out of the ordinary before. But on one side of the road was a campground and a pond, and on the other was just some overgrowth and a foundation. Something had clearly once been there, but it wasn't anymore. And there was the shadow of a crosswalk crossing from the camp to the foundation. It's about dusk, and Ben and I are coming around the curve, and in the crosswalk, we just see this figure. It's a figure of a man, and you can very clearly make him out as he strides along the crosswalk. It takes me a couple seconds to register that there's someone in the crosswalk, but he's out of way. He poofs into mist at the end. My brother and I continue, and he turns to me after about 5 minutes and says, "Are we gonna talk about what we just saw?" And we've talked about the Vanishing Mist Man a lot. He never tried to get in our car, but he was very, very similar to the Vanishing Hitchhiker. Is there a correlation between this Vanishing Mist Man that I myself have experienced? I don't know. But the Vanishing Hitchhiker has always unnerved me for this reason. My strongest paranormal experience does seem to have relation to this tale. There is also another take on the Vanishing Hitchhiker that I very much enjoy. It's from, of all things, the Twilight Zone. This one, the Vanishing Hitchhiker, is in fact the spirit of death, and it's constantly haunting after a woman who has died in a car accident but doesn't realize it. It haunts her, continuously saying and appearing at the side of the road, "Going my way?" It's a chilling tale, and yet another instance of how widespread the instances of the Vanishing Hitchhiker are in our paranormal experiences. Whatever this creature is, whatever you experience, be good to those around you. You never know when that humble old person in disguise might be a deity, or perhaps just a lost spirit trying to find their way home. Or perhaps, of all things, you are the spirit, and the person that you come across is your salvation to getting home. Whatever it may be, the Vanishing Hitchhiker is prevalent throughout our paranormal tales. There's something hissing at me from the bush. Definitely not a hitchhiker. Whatever it may be that draws those that need a ride to those with kind hearts. Remember, if it is a spirit, you can help. And you will eventually get that jacket back. If it is a deity, perhaps you will be rewarded by the grace of a goddess. And if it's something else, there's one more we haven't touched upon. One more type of Vanishing Hitchhiker. Those that spew prophecies and omens. You see, it's not always spirits or gods, but potentially messengers that appear. They often appear in the form of old men and old women, and when they enter the car, because you will allow them to. It's a compulsion very similar to the spirits. When they enter the car, they will begin speaking in a language that you probably don't speak, but somehow find yourself understanding all the same. Their prophecies will often be dark and full of omens and ill portents, and very, very often they come true about you. So whatever it is that you find yourself picking up on the side of the road, whomever, be careful. It might be a god, or a spirit, or an omen, or something stranger still, like a man curiously made out of mist. Whatever the Vanishing Hitchhiker is, of all the paranormal things, this is the one that you are perhaps best likely to encounter. And perhaps you already have. Thank you so much for joining us on another edition of our Spooky Sunday Storytime, everyone. Once again, I am Andrew Hill, and this has been Seaside Shadows, Vanishing Hitchhiker's Tales.